First contact and defiance. They arrived on a Wednesday. 6 massive vessels appeared simultaneously in Earth's orbit, materializing without warning or detection. These weren't the sleek, streamlined ships of science fiction fantasies. They were vast, asymmetrical structures that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it, creating void-like silhouettes against the blue of Earth's atmosphere. Global communications networks experienced momentary disruptions as satellites adjusted their positioning data to account for these new celestial bodies. Astronomers worldwide trained their instruments skyward, military organizations went on high alert, and civilians pointed smartphone cameras toward the heavens, capturing blurry images that would soon flood social media. Dr. Ileana Vasquez was in her laboratory at the Pan American Space Agency when the alert came through. She abandoned her coffee and genetic sequencing data to join her colleagues crowding around the main display terminal. The feed showed real-time imagery from the International Space Station, where astronauts had front-row seats to humanity's first confirmed encounter with extraterrestrial intelligence. "My God," whispered Dr. Haruki Tanaka beside her. "They're enormous." Ileana nodded silently. Initial size calculations estimated each vessel at approximately 2 kilometers in length. The dark hulls displayed occasional pulses of iridescent energy that rippled across their surfaces like oil on water. For 36 hours, the vessels maintained position, seemingly dormant. World leaders convened emergency sessions, religious figures offered prayers and interpretations, and ordinary citizens vacillated between terror and fascination. Some fled major cities, while others gathered in them, seeking community in the face of the unknown. Then came the broadcast. Every electronic device on Earth with audio-visual capability simultaneously activated. Television screens, smartphones, tablets, digital billboards, all displayed the same image. A figure that appeared vaguely humanoid, but with proportions just wrong enough to trigger instinctive unease. Its skin was pallid gray, eyes too large and entirely black, limbs elongated beyond human norms. When it spoke, its mouth moved in perfect synchronization with words in flawless English, though reports would later confirm that each device worldwide delivered the message in the local language. "People of Earth, we are the Novan Collective. We have traveled far to reach your resource-rich world. Your planet contains elements essential to our civilization's continued advancement. We will begin extraction procedures within your solar cycle. Resistance is inadvisable but anticipated. Those who cooperate will be permitted controlled habitation zones. Those who resist will be neutralized. This is not a negotiation." The transmission ended as abruptly as it had begun, leaving billions in stunned silence. Within hours, military forces worldwide launched counter-offensive measures. Intercontinental ballistic missiles, experimental orbital defense systems, and every weapon humanity had developed for warfare among its own species were redirected toward the alien threat. The Novan vessels absorbed the attacks without apparent damage. Energy weapons dissipated against their hulls. Physical projectiles disappeared into what appeared to be localized distortions in space itself. The response was swift and devastating. Precision energy pulses disabled military installations across the globe, resulting in thousands of casualties, but clearly designed to minimize collateral damage, not from compassion, but from a desire to preserve resources. 3 days after first contact, representatives from the United Nations Security Council gathered in an underground facility in Geneva. The meeting included military leaders, scientists, and key government officials from major world powers. "They're picking us apart systematically," General Wei announced, displaying tactical data on the main screen. "Our conventional weapons are useless. Nuclear options have been taken off the table after what happened in the Arabian Sea." The room fell silent, remembering the failed nuclear strike that had been neutralized mid-flight, its energy somehow contained and redirected harmlessly into space, a demonstration of technological superiority that eliminated nuclear weapons as a viable option. "What about the Helios project?" asked the British Prime Minister. Dr. Ileana Vasquez, who had been invited to represent the scientific community, stepped forward. "Helios isn't ready. We've only managed to harness the quantum entanglement effect at a distance of 3 kilometers. To reach orbit, we'd need—" "Dr. Vasquez," interrupted the U.S. president, "we don't have the luxury of waiting for perfect solutions. What can you give us now?" Ileana hesitated, then squared her shoulders. "There's something else. For the past 16 hours, my team has been analyzing the communication patterns from the Novan ships. There's a consistent oscillation in their transmission frequencies, a pattern that doesn't appear natural or random." She projected a series of waveforms onto the display. "These energy signatures repeat across all their communications and even in the propulsion systems of their smaller craft. Dr. Abramovich at CERN believes it might be related to the fundamental resonance frequency of their technology." "And how does this help us?" asked the Russian president. "If, and this is theoretical, if we could generate a counter-frequency at sufficient amplitude, we might disrupt their systems, not destroy them, but potentially interfere with their operations enough to buy us time." General Wei frowned. "To generate a signal of that magnitude would require more power than any single broadcast system on Earth." "Not one system," Ileana said. "All of them. Every radio telescope, broadcast tower, and communication array on the planet, reconfigured to emit the same frequency simultaneously." The audacity of the proposal silenced the room. "You're suggesting a level of global coordination that's unprecedented," said the Chinese premier slowly. "So is an alien invasion," Ileana countered. "This isn't about politics anymore. It's about survival." After hours of debate, the unprecedented was authorized. Operation Harmonic Shield would coordinate resources across all nations, repurposing global communication infrastructure into what would effectively become the largest transmitter ever created by human hands. Dr. Mora Abramovich's team at CERN worked feverishly to calculate the precise counter-frequency needed, while engineers worldwide modified equipment never designed for such purposes. Nations that had been adversaries days earlier now shared technological secrets and resources. Military forces reorganized to protect key transmission installations, knowing they would become primary targets once the Novans detected the plan. 7 days after first contact, as the aliens began deploying smaller harvest vessels toward Earth's surface, humanity was ready to broadcast its response. Ileana stood in the Global Coordination Center established in Geneva, watching as status indicators from around the world turned green one by one. Transmission sites in every continent reported ready, radio telescopes in Australia and South Africa, military installations in North America and Russia, communication arrays across Europe and Asia, and hastily assembled sites throughout Africa and South America. "Final systems coming online," reported the technical director. "Synchronization at 98.9% and holding. Counter-frequency loaded and verified at all sites." The Secretary General of the United Nations stepped forward. On a normal day, activating a global transmission system would require countless diplomatic procedures and authorizations. Today, she simply nodded. "Begin transmission." Around the world, thousands of transmission systems simultaneously directed their power skyward, generating a unified signal at precisely the frequency calculated to disrupt Novan technology. The power requirements were so enormous that rolling blackouts swept across continents, but contingency plans had prepared civilian populations. For 30 seconds, nothing happened. Then, the nearest Novan vessel visibly shuddered. The iridescent energy patterns across its hull became erratic, pulsing chaotically. The smaller harvest craft that had been descending toward Earth halted their approach, then began moving in irregular patterns. "It's working," whispered Ileana. As if in response, one of the Novan vessels redirected itself, moving to position directly above the largest transmission cluster in North America. A concentrated energy beam lanced downward, destroying the installation and causing hundreds of casualties. Within moments, similar precision strikes targeted major transmission sites worldwide. "They're adapting," General Wei announced grimly. "Faster than we anticipated." But humanity had anticipated this response. Secondary and tertiary transmission sites activated as primaries were destroyed, maintaining the signal integrity. Civilian broadcast stations, modified amateur radio networks, and even repurposed satellite dishes joined the effort, creating a distributed network too numerous to target effectively. The aliens' response escalated. Instead of precision strikes, they began wider bombardments, sacrificing their careful resource preservation for survivability. Cities burned. Casualties mounted into the hundreds of thousands, yet the global signal continued, strengthening as more systems came online, refined by real-time analysis of the Novan's reactions. 23 hours into the transmission, the energy patterns across all 6 Novan vessels began synchronizing, pulsing in unified rhythm. They're coordinating a response. Ileana realized, studying the data. Something big. The Novan ships arranged themselves in a hexagonal formation and began generating a visible energy field between them, a web of brilliance that grew in intensity until it was painful to view even through filtered cameras. All stations, maximum power, ordered the Secretary General. Whatever they're doing, we need to disrupt it now. Power grids worldwide diverted every available megawatt to the transmission effort. Hospital emergency generators, vehicle batteries, even private solar installations were voluntarily connected to the network in a desperate push for additional power. The energy web between the Novan ships contracted suddenly, then expanded outward in a visible shockwave that descended toward Earth's atmosphere. As the wave approached, Ileana's instruments detected something unexpected. The pulse contained embedded within it the exact counter-frequency to Earth's transmission, but amplified exponentially. They're not just countering our signal, she realized with dawning horror. They're using our own frequency against us. The alien countermeasure struck Earth's atmosphere with catastrophic effect, not as a weapon of physical destruction, but as a targeted electromagnetic pulse of unprecedented scale. Across the planet, transmission systems exploded in cascades of sparks and flame. Power grids failed, electronic devices died, and the carefully constructed global signal faltered. In the Geneva Command Center, backup systems activated immediately, but the data was clear: they were losing the battle. The global signal had dropped to 40% strength and falling rapidly. "We need more power," Ileana stated, the calm in her voice belying her desperation. "And we need to modify the frequency. They've adapted to our current approach." Dr. Abramovich's voice came through on one of the few remaining communication channels. "I'm sending a new frequency pattern now. It's not perfect, but it should bypass their countermeasures temporarily." As the new pattern was distributed to remaining transmission sites, the Secretary General received a direct communication from the Japanese Prime Minister. "We have a proposal," he said without preamble. "The Kagoshima Quantum Accelerator. It wasn't designed as a transmission system, but we believe it can be modified to amplify your signal by a factor of 10. The scientists in the room exchanged glances. The Kagoshima facility was cutting-edge technology, not yet publicly acknowledged by the Japanese government. The reconfiguration would be unstable, the Prime Minister continued. "We estimate a 94% probability that the facility would be destroyed in the process." "And the surrounding area?" asked the Secretary General. A pause. "Minimal civilian risk. We've already begun evacuation. But we will lose the research team. They volunteered to remain and execute the transmission." The decision was made in seconds. As the modified frequency was implemented worldwide, the Kagoshima facility began its reconfiguration. 30 minutes later, as the global signal had deteriorated to just 22% of its original strength, the quantum accelerator activated. The effect was immediate and dramatic. A visible beam of energy erupted from the Japanese island, striking the nearest Novan vessel directly. The ship's energy patterns went haywire, its surface rippling as though made of liquid rather than solid material. The disruption cascaded to connected vessels through their energy web, which fluctuated wildly before collapsing entirely. For the first time since their arrival, The Novan ships appeared vulnerable. The Kagoshima facility imploded moments later, the sacrifice of its team creating a window of opportunity that humanity seized without hesitation. Remaining transmission sites worldwide maximize output, focusing on the disruption pattern proven effective by the Japanese sacrifice. One by one, the smaller Novan harvest vessels lost power and drifted in orbit. The main ships maintained functionality but ceased all offensive operations, their energy patterns indicating significant internal disruption. As dawn broke over Geneva on the 8th day since first contact, Ileana studied the incoming data with cautious optimism. "They've entered some kind of defensive configuration," she reported. "All weapons systems appear offline. They're vulnerable, but we've lost too many transmission sites to push our advantage significantly." The military leaders immediately began strategizing a potential offensive, but were interrupted when all functioning communication devices once again activated simultaneously. The alien figure appeared, but its perfect composure had vanished. It moved erratically, the translation system failing intermittently. "You have unexpected capabilities," it stated. "Our assessment was incorrect. Continued conflict is inefficient. We propose cessation of hostilities. Negotiation of terms." The Secretary General stepped forward. "Your previous communication indicated this was not a negotiation. Circumstances have changed." The alien's massive eyes blinked in an unsettlingly human gesture. "You have demonstrated resource value beyond material extraction. We will withdraw harvest operations pending diplomatic exchange." As the transmission ended, the command center erupted in cautious celebration. It wasn't victory, not yet, but humanity had achieved what had seemed impossible days earlier, forcing a technologically superior invader to the negotiating table. Ileana stepped away from the celebrations, staring at the data still flowing across her screens. The Novan ships were already beginning to repair themselves, adapting to the frequencies that had proven so effective. Whatever advantage humanity had gained would be temporary. But perhaps temporary was enough. The Novans had underestimated human ingenuity once. In the coming negotiations, that might prove to be their greatest weakness and humanity's greatest strength. The signal and humanity's stand. The diplomatic exchange with the Novans began 3 days after their request for negotiation. Earth's representatives gathered in a hastily constructed neutral facility in international waters off the coast of Singapore, while the aliens sent a single envoy in a small craft that hovered above the water surface. The Novan diplomat, who introduced itself as Observer Ket, was even more unsettling in person than in transmissions. Standing nearly 2.5 meters tall with unnaturally fluid movements, it spoke through a translation device that converted its natural communication, a complex series of subsonic vibrations, into human language. "Your signal weapon was unanticipated," Observer Ket stated without preamble. "The collective has reassessed your species' potential utility." The Secretary General maintained a diplomatic tone despite the obvious implication that humans were being evaluated for utility rather than recognized as equals. "We're pleased to find a peaceful resolution. What terms do you propose?" "The collective requires certain resources. We will designate extraction zones comprising approximately 30% of your planetary surface. These areas will be evacuated of human presence. In exchange, we will provide technological knowledge and non-interference in remaining territories." The human delegation couldn't hide their shock at the proposal. The aliens were still demanding nearly a third of Earth's surface. "That is unacceptable," stated the Chinese premier firmly. "We will not surrender any sovereign territory." Observer Ket's large eyes blinked slowly. "Your alternative is continuation of conflict. Your signal weapon provided temporary advantage, but adaptation is already complete. The next phase of warfare would result in significant human casualties." Dr. Ileana Vasquez, present as a scientific advisor, had been studying the translation device the Novan used. Something about its operational frequency nagged at her. As the negotiations continued in increasingly tense circles, She discreetly ran spectral analysis using a modified smartphone. What she discovered sent a chill through her. The translation device operated on a frequency harmonic nearly identical to the signals the Novan ships had used to communicate with each other, the same vulnerability they had exploited with the global transmission. More significantly, the device appeared to be neurologically linked to observer Ket. The connection was so integrated that the diplomat's nervous system essentially extended into the technology. While political leaders continued the frustrated negotiations, Ileana slipped a note to Dr. Haruki Tanaka, who quietly left the room to contact the scientific team in Geneva. By the time the first negotiation session concluded without progress, Ileana had confirmed her theory. The Novans weren't just using technology. They were integrated with it on a fundamental level that blurred the distinction between biological and artificial. Their ships, their weapons, their communication systems, all extensions of their consciousness. They're lying about adapting to our signal, she informed the human delegation in private. The frequency disruption didn't just affect their technology. It directly impacted their neural networks. That's why they stopped the attack so abruptly. They were experiencing something equivalent to extreme pain. The revelation changed the strategic calculation entirely. What had seemed like a clever but temporary technical advantage was actually a profound existential threat to the invaders. "We can't reveal that we know this," advised the U.S. president. "If they realize their vulnerability is more fundamental than they've admitted, they might abandon negotiations entirely." "We need to strengthen our position first," General Wei agreed. "Dr. Vasquez, how quickly can we restore the global transmission capability?" "That's the problem," Ileana admitted. "We've lost over 70% of our major transmission infrastructure. Rebuilding would take months, and the Novans would surely detect and prevent it." The room fell silent until Dr. Tanaka spoke up. "What about the resonance network?" All eyes turned to him. It was theoretical, a project several quantum physics labs were collaborating on before the invasion. Using quantum entanglement to create instantaneous communication across vast distances. The technology wasn't ready for communication purposes, but as a simultaneous transmission system. "Could it work?" asked the Secretary General. "Possibly," Ileana said, mind racing through calculations. "Instead of rebuilding conventional transmitters, we create a network of smaller, less detectable quantum resonators. Individually, they'd be too weak to register as threats to the Novans, but activated simultaneously through quantum entanglement." "How long?" General Wei demanded. "With global cooperation and resources. 5 days, maybe 4. The decision was unanimous. While diplomatic negotiations continued as a distraction, Operation Quantum Chorus began worldwide. Scientific teams in 17 countries worked around the clock, manufacturing thousands of small quantum resonators designed to Dr. Tanaka's specifications. Military and civilian distribution networks delivered the devices to predetermined locations across the globe, creating a web of transmission points too numerous and dispersed to effectively target. The plan required absolute secrecy. Any leak would alert the Novans to the strategy. To maintain the deception, human negotiators made incremental concessions in talks with observer Ket, appearing to reluctantly move toward accepting modified terms, while engineering teams worked feverishly to prepare humanity's true response. On the 4th day of negotiations, as resonator deployment reached 60% completion, disaster struck. A Novan scout craft detected unusual energy signatures from a resonator assembly facility in Brazil. Within hours, precision strikes destroyed similar facilities worldwide, and observer Ket arrived at the negotiation table with a dramatically altered demeanor. "Your deception is noted," it stated coldly. "Terms are withdrawn. Resource extraction will proceed with or without human cooperation." The Novan vessels above Earth began powering weapon systems once more, preparing for a renewed assault that would likely prove devastating to a human resistance now deprived of its primary countermeasure. In Geneva, Ileana and an international team of scientists watched the situation deteriorate with growing desperation. The resonator network was incomplete, with thousands of devices deployed but insufficient coverage for effective disruption of the Novan fleet. "We need more time," Dr. Abramovich insisted, reviewing simulation data. With current deployment, signal strength would reach only 38% of required amplitude. "Time is what we don't have," Eliana replied, watching satellite feeds of Novan harvest vessels beginning their descent toward Earth. "We need to activate now, with whatever we have." The argument became moot when long-range sensors detected a massive energy buildup in the Novan fleet. They were preparing a preemptive strike against major population centers, no longer concerned with preserving resources, but eliminating resistance. "Activate the network," ordered the Secretary General from Singapore, where negotiations had collapsed entirely. Full emergency protocol. Around the world, activation codes were transmitted to the deployed resonators. As each device powered up, it established quantum entanglement with the entire network, creating a system that operated as a single organism despite being distributed across continents. The initial pulse was, as predicted, insufficient. Monitoring systems showed disruption effects on the Novan vessels, but nothing approaching the level achieved during the first global transmission. The aliens continued their attack preparation, seemingly only mildly inconvenienced. Then came the breakthrough. Dr. Lu Wei, a quantum physicist from Beijing, who had been analyzing the Novan neural technological interface, made a critical discovery. "It's not about power," she announced suddenly. "It's about precision. Their neural networks operate on a modulated frequency. We need to target the specific neural harmonic within the broader spectrum." Working with unprecedented speed, the scientific team recalibrated the resonator network, focusing not on raw power, but on targeting the exact frequency that would disrupt the Novan neural architecture. The refined signal would be weaker in conventional terms, but exponentially more effective against their specific vulnerability. When the recalibrated network activated, the effect was immediate and dramatic. The Novan vessels visibly convulsed in orbit, their energy systems fluctuating wildly. The harvest craft already in Earth's atmosphere lost control, many crashing into unpopulated areas or the ocean. On view screens worldwide, Observer Ket could be seen physically collapsing during a broadcast, clearly experiencing neural disruption directly through its connection to Novan technology. But the victory was far from secure. The resonator network, hastily deployed and operating beyond design parameters, began failing. Devices burned out in cascading failures, reducing signal strength with each passing minute. "We're losing the network," reported the technical director in Geneva. "Resonator stability at 23% and falling." The Novans, despite clear distress, began adapting. Their ships reconfigured, attempting to shield against the specific frequency. It was a race between human ingenuity and alien adaptation, with the fate of Earth hanging in the balance. In this critical moment, Dr. Ileana Vasquez made a decision that would alter the course of the conflict. "The Kagoshima Principle," she announced. "We need a focused amplification point." Her colleagues immediately understood the reference to the Japanese quantum accelerator that had sacrificed itself to create the first breakthrough against the Novans. "The CERN collider," Dr. Abramovich said quietly. "We could reconfigure it as an amplifier for the neural disruption frequency. The power output would be significant." "And the risk?" asked the Secretary General, who had maintained an open communication line throughout the crisis. "Total destruction of the facility, at minimum," Ileana answered honestly. "Possible quantum cascade effects beyond that, but it would generate a pulse strong enough to penetrate any adaptation the Novans might develop." The decision was made not by politicians, but by the scientific team at CERN itself. As the resonator network continued degrading, Dr. Abramovich and her colleagues began the dangerous reconfiguration process, knowingly sacrificing one of humanity's greatest scientific achievements for its survival. 3 hours later, as the Novan ships began recovering from the initial disruption and resuming attack positioning, The CERN facility channeled the power of its massive particle accelerator into a single, precisely calibrated quantum pulse. The resulting transmission was invisible to human senses, but devastating to Novan neural networks. Their ships went completely dark, drifting powerlessly in orbit. The communication systems used to transmit threats and demands fell silent. For several tense hours, Earth waited for a response, unsure whether the pulse had merely disabled the aliens or destroyed them entirely. The answer came unexpectedly. The single small craft descended slowly toward the Singapore facility where negotiations had taken place. It operated on visible backup systems, lacking the imposing energy signatures of previous Novan technology. Inside was Observer Ket, noticeably weakened but alive. Its translation device had been discarded. Instead, it carried a simple electronic tablet with pre-written text. The message was brief. The collective withdraws. Your species' defense mechanism targets our essential nature. Coexistence impossible under current parameters. We will depart your system. The human delegation, skeptical after previous deceptions, demanded verification. In response, Observer Ket offered unprecedented access to Novan biological and technological information, enough to prove they were genuinely vulnerable to the quantum disruption method humanity had discovered, and that continued conflict would be mutually destructive. Over the following days, the massive Novan ships gradually powered back up using modified systems that appeared deliberately designed to operate on frequencies that wouldn't trigger human defenses. True to their word, they began moving away from Earth orbit, retreating to the outer solar system. A small diplomatic contingent remained behind. Volunteers who had undergone procedures to reduce their neural technological integration, making them less vulnerable to the quantum disruption. Their purpose, they explained, was to establish communication protocols for future interactions that wouldn't require direct neural interfaces. 1 month after the Novan's initial arrival, Ileana Vasquez found herself in a secured facility in Geneva, sitting across from a Novan diplomat who now used a purely mechanical translation device rather than a neural interface. Your species was categorized incorrectly, the alien explained. We identified Earth as resource-rich but technologically primitive. This was an error. A nearly catastrophic one, Ileana noted. The collective has existed for 12,000 of your years, the diplomat continued. In that time, we have encountered 37 sentient species. You are the first to develop effective countermeasures to our technology. We're adaptable, Ileana replied simply. Yes, this quality was undervalued in our assessment protocols. The alien's large eyes blinked slowly. The collective has initiated revaluation of all encounter methodologies based on the Earth experience. The implications were significant. Humanity hadn't just defended itself. It had fundamentally changed how an ancient, technologically advanced civilization would interact with other species in the future. The diplomat continued. We propose exchange of knowledge, controlled, mutual, areas which do not compromise security of either species, beginning with safe communication protocols. And the resources you originally came for, we will seek them elsewhere. Less challenging locations. As the meeting concluded, Ileana found herself reflecting on how close humanity had come to destruction and how the very qualities that made humans frustrating, their diversity, stubbornness, creativity, and refusal to submit, had proven to be their salvation. The Novans had arrived expecting to find a primitive species worthy only of exploitation. Instead, they had encountered humanity, flawed, divided, but ultimately unified when faced with extinction, and capable of turning theoretical science into practical defense in mere days when survival demanded it. The quantum disruption technology that had saved Earth was already being developed into a planetary defense system, ensuring that any future visitors would think carefully before threatening humanity. More importantly, the experience had demonstrated that despite national differences and historical conflicts, humans could achieve remarkable feats of cooperation when united by common purpose. 6 months after the Novan retreat, A permanent diplomatic outpost was established at Lagrange Point L5, where representatives of Earth and the collective began the slow process of building peaceful relations. The aliens remained physically unsettling to human sensibilities, and their collective consciousness was fundamentally different from human individuality. But mutual respect had replaced conquest, a victory perhaps more significant than the technological triumph that had made it possible. As she prepared for her first assignment at the new outpost, Ileana found a message waiting in her secure communication channel. It was from the Novan diplomat she had been working with, sent through the new non-neural interface system they had developed together. It contained just a single line. "We came seeking resources. We found equals instead. Both outcomes have value." From the depths of space, the signal that had changed the war continued to resonate, not as a weapon, but as a reminder that humanity's greatest strength had always been its ability to transform theoretical possibilities into practical solutions when faced with existential challenges. The stars had witnessed the proof of that resilience, and any watching eyes among them now knew Earth would not fall easily.